Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar. We'll just give a minute or so for everyone to join and we'll kick it off right after. Okay, we can get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Today we'll be covering, the topic of the science of converting landing pages. How do we boost campaign performance in banking and financial services vertical specifically? Um, I'm Vishal. I'm VP of Solutions, at iQuanti, and today I have Chris with me, who's the CMO at Laurel Road, and very excited to do this webinar with him. He comes with a ton of experience. He's a very seasoned marketer, and before Laurel Road, he was the CMO of Best Egg. So I'll just have him quickly introduce himself. Chris.
Hi. Thanks, Vishal. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Excited to be here and talk about some of the great work we've done at Laurel Road and in partnership with the iQuanti team. As Vishal said, I've been around a long time. I've got about 20 years of financial services marketing experience, mostly in digital at enterprises big and small. So I've kind of been through a lot, seen a lot, and I'm excited to share a small piece of it here today with you and talk through it with Vishal.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Very excited. And yeah, a little bit about me. So I'm a VP of Solutions at iQuanti. Been here for 7 years. I have over 15 years of experience in product strategy, product marketing, acquisition marketing. I've worked across organizations, including Discover and fintech firms like Innova. So really excited to have this conversation with you today. Before we get into the topic, just want to introduce iQuanti. So iQuanti is a performance marketing product and solutions firm. We are heavily embedded in the financial services vertical. Over 80% of our clients are in this vertical. We work with major banks in North America. Um, we are headquartered in the New York City area, but we have a global presence. We've been around since 2008, and we've been growing very fast. Right, we've been in the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies for 9 times. And what we offer, right? We offer a variety of services across the entire spectrum of digital marketing, right from digital consulting to demand generation to experience optimization and data science and analytics. And across all of these areas, we have variety of proprietary products and solutions. And one of that will be covering in the session today. How can we leverage that to drive good landing page performance in addition to other strategies, right? Um, so diving right into the topic today. So what we'll be covering today, we'll start with some of the key challenges that enterprises face in delivering strong landing page performance. Then we'll talk about what are the key tactics that we recommend to deliver relevant and compelling landing page experiences. And then we deployed this strategy and bunch of these tactics for Laurel Road, and we've seen some amazing results. So we'll dive into the case study, what we did, how we did it, what were the results, right? And then in the end, we'll have some key takeaways for everyone. Right? So let's get right in. So the first thing, what we see in the market, right? With a lot of advertisers, especially in the financial services vertical, where they're spending millions and millions of dollars in marketing, specifically digital marketing. And there's a lot of focus on optimizing media and optimizing campaigns, right? Whether it's bids, budgets, targeting, creatives, right? But there isn't enough focus on optimizing the experiences and landing pages, or any sort of landing experiences, whether it is separate landing pages or site pages that you're using as landing pages. That's a very important part of the experience strategy. And even small incremental improvements in the performance can have a dramatic impact on overall campaign economics, right? But this is not happening, right? Marketers are leaving a lot of money on the table by not optimizing the experiences. And the reason that this is happening are because of a few challenges. And this is what we have seen across the industry over time, right? One of the biggest ones is a very siloed approach to optimizing media and optimizing experience. It's separate teams, separate silos. The second, what we see is there is some amount of testing and optimization happening, but oftentimes it's not a very scientific approach, not a very data driven approach. Uh, Organizations are not leveraging learnings effectively. And the third one is lack of velocity due to limited martech capabilities and technology bandwidth, right? So because of this, they're not able to maximize the impact of the overall optimization and the testing program, right? So we'll dive into each of these challenges and provide you with the very actionable solutions across each of these. So the first challenge that we dive into is a siloed approach to media and experience optimization, right? So Chris, you have been in the industry, for a while, and you've seen this challenge, on an ongoing basis, right? So I want to pass it on to you to shed some light on it. What are the kind of disconnected experiences, and what are the challenges that you've seen?
Yeah, so I think for me, I've been in a lot of organizations, and unfortunately, I've seen it in most of them, this
Yeah.
siloed approach that we're talking about, where you have, for example, a digital marketer who has a couple of landing pages set up, and they're trying to optimize the media as it hits those landing pages. And they're kind of operating on their own, doing the best they can, maybe asking for some design tweaks here and there. But the whole team that could be impacting what the outcome is not necessarily engaged properly in the challenge, right? So there's nobody there really understanding the customer intent necessarily from a research perspective. There's not a lot of design thinking going into what the actual experience is. And the team that designs the products often is missing from the conversation about how best to optimize these experiences as well. And the result of that often is like the customer at the end of the day just gets lost in terms of what that journey is. And you end up spending, and you alluded to this already, Vishal, in many cases, millions of dollars that you're just flushing down the proverbial toilet because you have not optimized this experience, and some simple tweaks could help you get there. And so, do you want to move to the next slide?
Yeah.
I think, and this is one, and hopefully I don't know if there's anyone from Bank of America on the call or not, and we're certainly not trying to pick on Bank of America today, but what does this look like when it doesn't go well, I think is what we're trying to depict here today. And this is kind of a simple example. You have a customer who's coming and they're searching very specifically for a cashback card with no annual fee. And what you see them get is a very cashback forward experience, right? On the right. And that's great, but very clearly their intention also is to ensure there is no annual fee on the product. And so the way the messaging comes across in this example, it just isn't there, right? And so if you're getting the right folks together and watching these sessions or looking at the copy and going through an iterative process, there's likely a lot of gains to be had on an experience like this one. And in fact, that's what we're going to be talking about that we did at Laurel Road and some of the great success that we've had in the past. And so, I alluded to this a little bit already, but who should be there in these conversations? To my mind, it's certainly whoever is spending the money on the media and trying to optimize those channels, those placements, that ad copy, whatever the case may be. Also, anyone who's focused on conversion rate optimization, including if you have a great partner like iQuanti who's helping you with these experiences, they need to be in the conversation around this. I think design has a huge part to play. And like I said, the product team as well. Getting all of these people aligned to what are consumers looking for and how do you best serve up messaging around it. I think that's the key to success as you're building out these experiences.
Perfect. Yep. And this is a challenge that we keep seeing, right? And we were talking about this the other day. Like, we didn't have to look hard for a broken experience, right? Like, even if you do like a few searches, yourself across different terms, you will come across, tons of these experiences wherein, the end ad copy, the landing page experience do not match, with the user intent, right? So this is a problem that we keep seeing over and over again. Moving on to the second bucket of challenges, which is focused on more lack of scientific approach to testing and optimization. Right. So with this, what we have done, with some clients and including Laurel Road, right, deployed a very scientific approach using Leap, which is our proprietary platform for ongoing, testing and optimization, which can really maximize the impact of the overall program, right? And then there's three main pillars to this, right? So the first one is really focused on understanding the underlying drivers of performance, right? So when typically advertisers have access to web analytics data, right? So they understand there is some problem with conversion rate or some problem with engagement rates or bounce rates, right? But there is lack of understanding why do those problems exist, right? So we have built this model which scores your landing page across 7 categories and 150 plus factors, right? And this is where we're using AI to drive the automation, right? So what I was going to do today is do like a quick demo of the tool and what it looks like and what sort of insights you can get out of it, right? So basically, if you take any specific landing page, right, and again not to pick on Amex, it's just any specific landing page that we took, like this is for business line of credit, right? So we just need to enter the URL. We also enter the domain name because a lot of times the domain and the subdomain for the landing page can be different. So we want to measure the consistency between the main brand and the landing page as well. And then whatever keywords you're using to target this particular page, right? So this is specifically for paid search, right? And then when you score the page, right, typically it takes a minute or two, right? So right now I had just ran it, so the version is cached, right? So basically what it tells you is, okay, how much it scores on the desktop and mobile experience, right? So around 56%, so there's quite a few gaps in terms of the experience. And what it tells you is how it scores across all of these different factors, right? So relevance is where it measures the relevance of the content of the page against the ad copy and the messaging, right? So over here seems like the page is doing pretty well. Assurance, it measures how measures the trustworthiness of the page by verifying a lot of security and transparency and brand signals. So over here it talks about like a few things that lack of any visible support options, right? no badges or accolades, from industry groups, right? No, the testimonial is there, but it's not, located very prominently, right? Then it looks at call to action, like what are some of the gaps with call to actions buttons, right? Again, it's good to have some eligibility criteria information located near the primary CTA to provide that guidance which is missing. In terms of decision criteria, like these are the factors that users use to make a decision about specific product. So there's details on fees or costs associated with this product is missing. There is no explicit mention of what they can expect in terms of the approval time, right, or credit score impact, right. And again, it'll be good to have a calculator to showcase the different examples of different products that they have, right, which is also missing, right. Ease of use talks about usability, right. So again, there are issues with inconsistent alignment, like a lot of the copy is left aligned, some copies are center aligned, right. So it's just not a best practice from a readability perspective. People don't read through pages, people scan through pages, right. So you want to make it as easy as possible for people to scan, right. And then technical performance is good, but seems like there's some gaps in accessibility. So it checks for WCAG standards, right. So things like contrast ratio between foreground and background colors, there are some challenges on this front, right. um, so this can, like quickly help you identify what are the big gaps on the page, right. And it takes the guesswork out of the performance analysis, right. So this is the first step of discovering the specific challenges, is almost scoring your page and understanding which are a lot of the high impact opportunities, right. The second thing that we do is having a very objective approach to building hypothesis and for prioritization, right. So when it comes to hypothesis, like how strong your hypotheses are going to determine how much impact you're going to have from your testing program, right. So we have this approach of creating hypothesis, like if you make this change, then we can potentially see this impact because of these reasons, right. And every single hypothesis is backed by some sort of data or empirical evidence, right. And even when it comes to prioritization, I mean, you will be able to identify 50 different opportunities, 50 different test ideas. You cannot test them all, right. Typically, you have like a very objective approach to prioritization, effort, impact, right. So what we do is we have a lot more objective approach, right, which takes into account very specific factors, right, like whether this element that you want to test, is this above the fold, is this noticeable within 5 seconds, right. So trying to remove that subjectivity from prioritization. So by having a very strong hypothesis and a very objective prioritization approach, you can maximize the impact of the overall testing program, right. And the third thing that we see is in terms of learning management, right. So again, one of the challenges with organizations is people transition in and out of organization, in and out of teams, right. And every time there is a new person coming in, you oftentimes recreate the wheel, and you don't leverage the learnings that you've had from the past. Also, if it's a large enterprise organization, you have multiple products, multiple silos, multiple teams, right, and they're doing their own thing, and not learning from each other. You don't have to test the same thing across multiple pages, multiple brands, right. So we have this learning management system, which is part of the tool, which really provides that level of learning across every test, every optimization that you've done, right. Okay, what was the test that you did, what was the problem statement, what was the test duration, what did you learn, what specific elements did you test, and what device, what segment is was for. So everything is centralized, everything is searchable, right. So this helps maximize the learning across the organization, right? And finally, one of the challenges that we keep hearing, from organizations is like, okay, even if we get like all of these different, recommendations, we have a solid, strategy in place. We have, really good, testing and optimization roadmap in place, right? But we just don't have, the technology resources to execute against that, or, the right sort of, MarTech to execute against that, right? And one thing that we've seen, like, organizations and brands that are investing in technology to craft, compelling and personalized experiences are able to deliver very strong outcomes, right? So earlier we saw one example wherein, the landing page experience is not matching with the user intent, right? They just have one experience. They're just trying to push that, no matter what the user intent is, right? So over here, what Discover does really well is Discover has, this is just the same product, right? This is Discover It Card. It's the same product, right? But the user intent could be very different, right? The user intent could be, balance transfer, or the user intent could be, cashback credit card, right? And this particular card has both those features, right? So they have, very, customized, personalized experiences for both of this intent, right? And there's a lot of different, ways to achieve this, right? But they are investing in that, technology to enable that, to ensure that, the messaging is relevant, to the user intent, right? And oftentimes it's a fight, to secure, that investing, right? So Chris, like in your experience, right, like what's really worked, for you to secure, that investing, to drive these, improvements and deliver these experiences.
Yeah, I think a few things, right? I mean, obviously, uh, you need to be able to articulate the size of the prize a bit for your peers, right? We had a robust slide of who I think should be in these conversations and be optimizing these experiences. That's not always a small investment, right? Um, but you don't start there. You start with something small and kind of prove out some wins along the way. And I think if you uh, can find some small wins, typically you can tell a story about how those things magnify over time. I'll just give you an example. Like if you had a 50% lift, you were spending $20 million, you were getting 10% conversion, instead of spending getting $2 million dollars worth of conversions through the pipeline, now you're getting three, right? That funds a lot of folks, depending on what your business is. So, start small, prove it out, and then scale it up, I think is really important. And then I think it's from there, I think it just gets easier in my experience too. Like it does, I don't like if you can have one or two big wins, you can kind of be running your team that produces those wins for quite a while because people just have seen the numbers and they believe that what you're doing is productive and valuable.
Yeah.
And I think as long as you're tying things back to the bottom line and have good data and reporting, there's always a strong case for this type of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like at every single client that we have implemented this sort of a solution, or like brought in a CRO program or a optimization program from scratch, it's started with a business case every single time, and then oftentimes it's just a pilot, right, just to prove out that business case, right? So what like some sort of a scoring model or a very data driven approach to optimization helps us do is really identify those high priority, high impact use cases upfront, so you can get those big wins uh, uh, at the beginning, right, to showcase the value, right?
Yep.
One, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, you keep going. Sorry.
No. And yeah, and the other one challenge that we also keep hearing in terms of MarTech capabilities, right? it's lack of some of the specialized resources, right? Like for instance, one thing that we keep hearing is like a lot of clients in the financial services use AEM, right? And AEM is a very component, based CMS, right? And any new experience that needs to be built out requires, building of, new components. And the technology team just doesn't have, the resources, or a lot of times the expertise, to build out, new components which align with the, experiences, right? So how do we, augment some very specialized resources who have, that expertise, that can build out, the component library, at a much faster velocity to, deliver against and build out, those experiences that we're recommending, right? So with a lot of clients, the way we work with their technology team is, we augment, our resources, who have, specialized skill sets in AEM, and they can work in a sandbox environment in their system to just build out those components. And the final, building of the page and getting the page live is managed, by the technology team, right? But by augmenting these specialized resources, we're able to drive, the velocity of implementation.
Yeah, and I think what I would add to that is just it is in some ways a shame that some of the
Mhm.
MarTech platforms that are out there, the types of things we'll talk about in a second, they just aren't designed to do them well.
Yep.
And I think the value you get if you can give answers to the questions, right? So I was talking about, hey, how do you build the business case to do this type of work?
Mhm.
That's one piece. If you're boxed in technologically, and that's one of the rebuttals for not pursuing it, being able to give the answer for that rebuttal, I think is extremely valuable. And I think a platform like this one is the answer that we found, at least at
Yep.
Laurel Road.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah, so now, diving into, the case study of Laurel Road, right? Like some uh, optimizations that we implemented and some awesome results that we saw. So Chris, I will pass it on to you to just, set the stage, and then we can get into, the case study.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of companies, Laurel Road, which is basically a full suite digital bank, we offer many products. We're trying to optimize the experience for someone who's looking for one of those products and convert them like any organization like us would be doing. Um, and I think uh, for us getting into this work, Vishal's done a good job of highlighting how you evaluate your current experience and then prioritize from there a roadmap of activities to try to improve. And so, Vishal, I might actually just hand it back to you to talk about how we
Yep.
did our prioritization. Then maybe I can talk about some of the great results that we saw.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So, like one of the products that we looked at for Laurel Road was the high yield savings account, right? Again, Laurel Road already had, very good, UX in place, right? Uh, Unlike a lot of financial firms, right, Laurel Road has a very strong, UX, and design team, and a lot of the work that they do on the experience side is really, really good, right? But what we were doing is we were bringing that, lens of how do we drive, conversions, how do we improve, the UX from a conversion standpoint, to improve, the business outcomes, right? And then we use, our tool to, identify some high impact, opportunities, right? So when we, look at this, right, like there's a few different things, that came up. Like one was, need for, trust in users, right? Even, showcasing FDIC, more prominently, because at least at that point where we were implementing this, that was top of mind, for users, right? The safety of money in the bank accounts, right? Even there was a lot of room for improving, how you showcase, the key value proposition. We'll get into, a little bit of detail. Opportunities, around CTA. How do we improve, scannability, right, to make the page more scannable overall? right? And optimizing it for mobile, right? And mobile is a big opportunity over here, right? And overall, like what we see is we have responsive designs, right? That's become table stakes these days. Like everyone has responsive design, right? But majority of our traffic has started coming on mobile now, and truly thinking about mobile first. Even when we say mobile first, a lot of times it's just responsive, right? It's not truly mobile first, right? So over the roadmap, we need to identify like what's a truly first mobile experience, right? By the same time, we want to we realize that that's going to take some time, right? So what are some of those high impact quick wins, short term opportunities that we can implement to get the ball rolling, right? And that's one of the opportunities that we were able to identify and implemented the test, right? So Chris, if you want to just talk about that test.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I did want to call out Vishal that, I think you're right. Laurel Road has really great user experience team and great designers. And so the power that we unleashed with the analysis that you just highlighted, it sort of magnified our ability to work quickly, iterate, and produce some results. Um, this example, I think, is a powerful one. I think most of us can relate to a high yield savings product and maybe shopping for that for their own savings needs. That's the products that we're talking about here. And obviously, we spend a lot of money, millions of dollars, marketing our version of this product. And super impressive results, right? We got a 100% lift in app start rate just by optimizing this experience and how it can be scanned and bringing the most important elements of it to light, right? And this is one of those tests where you look at the results and you're like, duh, of course, that's what you should do. It's just like pretty plainly obvious. People are looking for rates. But it's harder when you're actually designing these experiments or designing these experiences, thinking about the weight of font, things like that. And this methodology really helped us crack it, right? So 100% lift. Anytime I'm doubling any aspect of my business, I'm pretty excited about it. And that's basically what we did here, right? With this one simple experiment.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the great thing about this, though, is not just this one big win, but we've just kind of cracked the surface of what we're doing, right? So we're not done yet. Obviously, we've got experiments running all the time. We've got a whole roadmap that we've worked with the iQuanti team on to build out and produce more of these things. And I think the beauty of experience wins like these is they just stack on top of each other, right? So if you can have 100% win today and even a 10% win tomorrow, that 10% is a lot more powerful, right? Because you had that initial doubling of your results. Everything else sort of magnifies, like compound interest in a way, to use a savings metaphor. So we're really excited to keep this work going and continue to chip away at it. And I think we have the right partnership, the right platform, and the right operating model to do that.
Yep. Yeah, and just to touch on so this was one of the things which was the decision criteria, right? So it's not just the rate, right? But in addition to rate, like what users are looking for, right? Like no minimum balance, higher interest, FDIC insurance, is top of mind, for users, right? So bringing some of those points, and this is when we realize like a lot of the traffic is coming from channels like Facebook. And when you look at your page, you know the product so well, right? But someone is coming from a channel like Facebook or Instagram, right? They see an offer, they want to just quickly scan through it, right? So understanding that user perspective, right? And ensuring that that they're not going to have the time to read through this, right? So how do we quickly present the information, right? And it's amazing like how impactful this is. I mean, we were surprised how impactful this was, right? Like we've seen, improvements, very strong improvements across clients with these sort of approaches. But this one, hit it out of the park, right? And yeah, and it was not just about just the test. It was the overall partnership. So Chris, like passing back to you to just talk about that overall partnership as well, right?
Yeah, I think the partnership is the most important thing, right?
Mm.
And I think this is the key point. I've hit it a couple times, but the work just continues, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think we're blessed that we got a big win right out of the gate. So it's again a scenario where there's not a lot of question around the value of continuing to do this work. Um, but I'm super confident we're going to continue to unlock more and more value with our teams operating together. And the key is just to make that one conversation that's ongoing,
Yeah.
and make sure all the stakeholders are involved.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's like, again with Laurel Road, that's one thing that we saw, which we don't see with a lot of other marketers, is the marketing team and the content and UX team met on a weekly meetings, right, talking about their strategies, the optimizations that they're implementing, and obviously we involved in both of those work streams. So able to connect the dots and implement the optimizations, but having that partnership was really the key to get this going. Great. So yeah, so we covered the content, but just want to talk about some of the key takeaways, right? So yeah, so can't emphasize enough. It needs to be holistic strategy, end-to-end strategy from the customer perspective, across different silos, across different teams, right? And again, there is necessity to dive really deep into data to uncover performance drivers, right? A lot of times it's just like looking at like basic bounce rate, engagement rates, off the page, right? Like that's not going to give you any significant insights, right? You'll have to really look, at a very granular level to uncover, what are the different gaps, in experience, right? And there needs to be a lot more disciplined approach to testing and optimization, right? And again, not every test wins, right? But what you need to do is want to do is gather the learnings from tests that don't win as well, right? That's also equally important to understand what's not worked, why it's not worked, right? And as we discussed, some of the frameworks around having strong hypothesis, data backed hypothesis, a very objective prioritization model, ensuring ongoing learning management across the organization, that's very important. um, and finally, securing the technology investments by the process that Chris outlined is building business case, showcasing small wins, validating that ROI impact, evangelizing that, getting everyone excited, and getting that buy-in and ongoing investment, right? So those are some of the key things that you can do to make your experience strategy and your CRO strategy extremely successful. Uh, Anything else, Chris? Any other last words?
No, I think you summarized it beautifully. I think we should take some questions and see if anyone has any of those, and we can get into those.
Yep, perfect. So yeah, so just one small ask, from the audience before we get into questions. You should see a poll that must have come up on your screens. If you can just take 30 seconds to respond. We want to find out if you're interested in doing a platform demo of the solution of the tool that we showed, or even like a free custom assessment of any of your landing pages, right? So if you can just take a few seconds to respond, and if you're interested, we can get back to you. Cool. So I think we can dive into the questions now. Let me just start. sharing. Right. Let's see what questions we have gotten. Um, so yeah, first question. This is for you, Chris. Um, Chris, I presume you've done this type of work with other companies or your own teams. Why use iQuanti versus others in the space?
Um, that's a great question. It is true. I have definitely had some teams doing this type of work in the past. And I think look, everybody, if you're a solid marketing team, you're trying to optimize these experiences in some form or fashion. It would be easy to say, I'll just work with my media agency or um an off the shelf kind of tool. I think that misses the point that a lot of where a lot of the needs are that iQuanti satisfies, right? So for me, it's uh, hey, let's make sure we're prioritizing the right things, and then we have the right tech to ultimately run the tests that we need and get statistically significant results and be able to implement those quickly. For me, I think it's about that piece with iQuanti around prioritization and speed. Those are the big wins from my perspective. So obviously, I'm a fan, or I wouldn't be here talking about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Um, the other question that we have is how did we come up with the scoring model, scoring criteria, right? So, again, very good question. So, basically, we have done a lot of UX research. There is already a lot of UX research about the industry, which is out, in the market. So, leverage that, right? We have done a lot of testing and optimization in the past, so we have a lot of learnings into like what sort of test can drive what sort of impact, right? And looking at some of the performance that we've seen, so taking all of that data to figure out, okay, what does a scoring model look like for a page, for an experience, right? And using that to build that out, and then we using AI to drive automation of that scoring and do instant scoring within a few seconds to provide deeper insights. Again, we have the UX strategists that go in and provide specific recommendations, but like the first level of key gaps, right, and benchmarking and opportunities, right, that is something that we've been able to automate, and it's working very well, right? The other question that we have from Katie is, do you make recommendations for improvements after finding the opportunities? Yeah, absolutely, right? So, we are able to identify a lot of the gaps, right? Based on, quantitative analysis, based on, the UX scoring, we identify, okay, there is a gap, with, how you're showcasing the value proposition, right? Or the gap is with how, with usability on mobile experience, right? And we'll be able to see, okay, these are some big gaps, and there'll be a lot of minor gaps, right? And we're able to prioritize, okay, these are the few big gaps that need to be fixed first to drive the maximum impact, right? And then then go into the specific opportunities, right? Like we need to figure out like what are some things that can be deployed very quickly, some things that are going to take some time, right? But yeah, we always start with identifying the opportunities, the gaps, and then going into the specific recommendations. um, and the other question, so what tools or solutions are available to help landing page variations at scale for personalization, customization, like shown in? So yeah, so again, very good question, right? So you know personalization is a very broad umbrella, right? And there are a lot of different use cases for personalization, right? So a lot of times when you talk about personalization, people mean like customer level personalization, right? That is very individual level personalization. And oftentimes, that involves a robust, martech infrastructure, right? You want to personalize, specific offers, based on, specific users, your existing customers, right? You might want to use, a decision engine, a CDP, right? A personalization platform, right? That can be a complex setup, right? But the personalization that we showed about Discover, right? It's like those specific, keyword themes, right? That you want to, personalize your experience for, right? That can be like a very simple, personalization. You can deploy like one simple way would be like you create like two versions of the pages, as simple as that, right? To having like piece of code which customizes the key value proposition or the hero image or the hero banner completely for the specific campaign source codes, right? Again, those things are not a big technology undertaking. Those are very simple personalization use cases with minimal technology lift, right? So that's why what you want to start with, you want to identify what those key use cases are for you, right? uh, in terms of implementation, in terms of personalization, and then solve for those, and not have to like invest and figure out investment into a big martech infrastructure for every single use case, right? um, Chris, any other thoughts on that question?
No, I think you nailed it.
Yeah,
I feel, no, I think that's great.
yeah. All right. So there's more questions, coming in. So one is, have you done any testing deeper in the funnel beyond the marketing page? For example, have you done any testing beyond behind the login or within the account opening? If yes, are the tools and technology leveraged different from campaign pages? Um, Yes, right. So, we have done, post, login experiences, right? So the principles, the process, remains the same, right? The way we have to, modify, the scoring criteria, evaluation criteria, that changes, right? The objective changes, right? So for instance, for a landing page, we really want to showcase, things like effectiveness of value proposition, prominence of value proposition, right? For behind login pages, the objectives might be different, so we'll have to adjust the scoring criteria, but the principles and the process, that still remains the same, right? Other question we have is, can you give me an example where you helped a client optimize their landing page, and what did the conversion look like before and after, and what were the process, right? So yeah, so one example that we covered was with Laurel Road, right? Like, and that's uh, we saw the conversion rate improvement of more than 100%, and we have a lot of such examples. If you want to have details on more and other case studies, you can reach out and we can walk you through a lot of other case studies that we have. But yeah, there's a ton of examples like that.
Hey,
um,
Vishal, just on the earlier question, I think um, one thing we didn't talk about entirely,
yeah.
uh, but I think is a valuable consideration and something iQuanti can help with too, is one thing you want to avoid with your testing program is introducing confounding variables, right? And part of what we're talking about throughout this call was, hey, making sure all the relevant teams are assembled together and they're talking through the testing strategy. If you're not doing that, you can have, for example, a credit team running a test that the media team has no idea about. You could have somebody running a test in the application flow that other people don't know about and are impacting their results, right? And so I think just as you're thinking about your broader CRO or even organization wide testing strategy, the advice I always would give people is make sure you understand all the moving parts and when they can be moving because if you don't understand that and you don't have the full picture, you're kind of stepping on each other's toes and invalidating tests without even knowing that it's happening. And so kind of doing that inventory up front before you do any of this work, I think is incredibly important.
Perfect. Yep. Makes total sense. So those were the questions that we had. Uh, so thanks again, Chris, for your time and sharing, the success story as Laurel Road. Really, value this partnership. And thank you everyone, for attending and spending time with us. And feel free to reach out with any questions, and we'll be happy to answer any questions, offline as well. Right. So we'll be sharing this deck, and it will have, the email addresses and contact information, so you can reach out through that. And feel free to connect, on LinkedIn with myself and Chris, and happy to have a conversation there too.